Hello, everyone. It's 12:05. I want to try and keep us on schedule, so I'm going to get started. Please be seated. My name is David Melton. For those of you who don't know me, I'm the acting executive director for the Chicago Council of Lawyers. And we wanted to begin today by thanking all of our sponsors and contributors who made this program and the activities of the council possible. The larger contributors are listed in your program, assuming they got their things in on time. And we also want to express our thanks, of course, to each of our awardees and speakers today, as well as to the University Club for hosting us, and to the member, David Fleming, who has gotten us in here. We also want to acknowledge the current and former judges and public officials who were delighted to have joined us today. They include Chief Judge Virginia Kendall from the U.S. District Court. I don't see Judge Beach. I don't know if he's going to be able to make it today, but he is supposed to join us. Judge Julie Amon. Judge Jamie Shapiro. I don't see Judge Pat Holmes. Former Chief Judge Ruben Castillo, the federal court. Former Judge Michael Panter, the circuit court. Alderman Matt Martin. Former EPA Region 5 Administrator Deborah Shore. Former Alderman Marty Oberman. Former City Corporation Counsel and Council of Lawyers founder, Judd Minor. Bob Gelgofra, Mary Jane Plachik, Bill Welker, and Brendan Max from the Public Defender's Office. As well as legal academics, Carolyn Shapiro, Steve Schwinn, Michael Sang, and Sharon Fairley. So my apologies if I've missed anyone. You're all prominent, otherwise you wouldn't be here. We deeply appreciate each of you who have taken time out of your busy schedules to be here with us today. Last, but far from least, I want to personally express my thanks to my wife and lifelong partner, Nancy Siegel, without whom none of the arrangements for this event or many other events in my personal life would have ever been appropriately or effectively handled. The Chicago Council of Lawyers was founded in 1969 by Judd Minor and others as Chicago's Public Interest Bar Association. Since its founding, it has continuously engaged in the difficult, painstaking, and unglamorous work of trying to improve our legal and economic institutions. That work has spanned a wide variety of projects over the years, including improved evaluations of judges for both the benefit of the judiciary and the public, work on improving sentence diversion programs, and elimination of cash bail, all in efforts to minimize the damage done in the course of rendering criminal justice, and work on improvements to the high-volume courtrooms that ordinary citizens are most likely to encounter. We continue to do that type of work every day through our various committees, and you're welcome to join us in doing so. However, we are meeting here today at a time when the rule of law in our democratic institutions are under attack. We at the Council are doing everything within our admittedly limited powers to resist and oppose those attacks, and we do so in cooperation with many like-minded organizations and individuals. Doing so is not always easy, and it's not always successful, but it is essential. It is essential if we want to continue to live in a fair, just, peaceful, law-abiding society that treats all people equally and with compassion. In our program today, we will initially be recognizing 5 individuals and organizations who have acted as exemplars for the rest of us in responding to the attacks upon immigrants in our area over the past 18 months. We will then hear from Cara Hendrickson and Sharon Fairley about efforts by our state Attorney General's office to resist a wide variety of illegal attacks by the current federal administration. But hearing about resistance, while laudable and necessary, is not in itself sufficient. It only goes so far. We also must provide some hope and some indication of a vision or path forward that we can one day hopefully resume on our path to a more perfect union. So we will hear from Liam Connell about that, describing some tax and economic reforms that are desperately needed in this second Gilded Age. And finally, we will hear some short closing remarks from our incoming president, Rob Held, who's been very active and has gotten himself into a little trouble and gotten some other people into trouble in connection with some immigration activities. I would be remiss if I did not point out to you that the council is entirely dependent on contributions, pro bono services, and membership fees to conduct its activities. If you are not yet a member, we urge you to join us. You can join even if you're not a lawyer. If you are a member, please consider renewing your membership. And if you can afford it, please consider making a charitable contribution to the council or its charitable affiliate, the More Perfect Union Fund. There's a QR code that can be used to make such a contribution. It appears on the last page of your program, the back of your program. We have a full program today, and I want to try and be respectful of your time. So let's get started by inviting the 5 exemplars up to the stage to receive their awards and to make some brief remarks. First is Berto, Aguayo. And back to them. So let's get all 5 of them. Second is Locke, Bowman. This is in alphabetical order. Third is Ruben, Castillo. Fourth is Tsao from ICER. And fifth, accepting for Mary Meg McCarthy couldn't be here today, is Katrina from the Immigrant Justice Center. So let me briefly describe why we gave these people awards. Berto is an intellectual property lawyer with the firm of K&L Gates in Chicago. He was one of the principal organizers of what came to be known as the Rapid Response Network at the Hispanic Lawyers Association of Chicago. In partnership with community organizations, the network mobilized nearly 100 attorneys during Operation Midway Blitz to provide on-the-ground legal support to immigrant communities affected by ICE enforcement activities while helping to establish support and accountability mechanisms for immigrant families. So congratulations, Berto.
Hello, everyone. Buenos dias. Buenos dias. No, you got to do a little louder than that. Buenos dias. Buenos dias. There you go. Well, thank you, David. Thank you to the Chicago Council of Lawyers for this recognition. It is especially meaningful to receive this award along today's awardees, some of whom I was just reminded I interned for a long, long time ago. Before I begin, I want to thank my partner, Evelyn Escamilla, who is here today. Evelyn recently moved from East LA, and I am incredibly grateful to her for her support and for agreeing to trade California palm trees for Chicago winters. I also do have a confession to make. Like many awards, this award does not belong to me. It belongs to the collective action of a lot of community members. As I think about Evelyn, I think about October 4th in Bretton Park, the day that Marimar Martinez was shot 5 times by immigration enforcement agents. It was a Saturday, and Evelyn and I were supposed to go on a date, but instead my phone started blowing up with reports that someone had been shot in the neighborhood. We arrived a few minutes after the incident, and what I saw was chaos and a situation that was escalating rapidly. And before long, Evelyn and I, along with children, community residents, and even police officers, were being tear gassed without justification. As I tried to document what was happening and help de-escalate the situation, I realized something very quickly. I couldn't do it alone. I needed more people. I needed more attorneys. So I put a message on our Signal group chat asking for support. And people showed up. Attorneys from our Rapid Response Network at the Hispanic Lawyers Association of Illinois arrived one by one. They documented what was happening. They conducted intakes. They handed out masks. And they stood with residents. They used their legal training not in a conference room or in a courtroom, but on a street corner in the south side of Chicago. For 4 hours, we stood in the middle of a standoff between dozens of militarized agents in a neighborhood trying to make sense of what was happening around them. During Operation Midway Blitz, we lost a lot of people. We lost Silverio Villegas Gonzalez. Thousands of people were detained. And countless families were left wondering what would happen next. But when I think back on that period, I don't just remember the fear. I also remember those who showed up. I remember the lawyers who dropped what they were doing on a Saturday afternoon. I remember the community organizations that conducted Know Your Rights workshops like ICER. I remember the people who stood with their neighbors when it would have been a lot easier to just stay home. That is why this award does not belong to me. It belongs to the attorneys at the Rapid Response Network. It belongs to the organizers, advocates, and community leaders who gave their time, their energy, and sometimes even their own sense of safety. And it also belongs to the many people in this room and on this stage who, during our darkest moments, showed all of us that building a more perfect union happens when all of us show up for one another. Thank you.
Thank you, Berto. Our second awardee is Locke Bowman and the Loevy and Loevy law firm. Locke and members of the Loevy firm brought extensive federal litigation that documented and successfully challenged many of the illegal tactics being used by ICE in connection with the Midway Blitz operation this past year. He and the Loevy firm have since worked to demand as well that federal agents be held criminally accountable for the crimes they committed during that operation. Locke.
Thank you, David. On behalf of the lawyers and paralegals at the Loevy and Loevy law firm, I'm very pleased and honored to accept this recognition from the Chicago Council of Lawyers. It is, after all, the council which is an exemplar for Chicago's legal community on how to step up, speak up, and insist on a more just legal community and a better society. So that makes this recognition particularly meaningful. When Operation Midway Blitz got underway at the Broadview ICE facility last fall, and then metastasized around the city and the county, it was self-evident to many of us at Loevy, including the leadership of the law firm, including some at the firm who are members of directly affected communities, including many at the firm who were simply aching for the opportunity to stand up in some way and say no. It was apparent to us, therefore, that it was imperative for the law firm to be part of a larger coalition of lawyers and activists working to protect people from Chicago who were putting their bodies on the line to protest federal agents' random acts of violence, baseless arrests and detentions, and other desecrations of our city. To stand up for Chicagoans who were standing up themselves to protect their neighbors in peril. And that was so beautifully described just a minute ago. That coalition of lawyers, with Loevy at the helm, obtained a federal court injunction barring some of the most egregious federal tactics. And along the way, we scattered just a little bit of glass in the path of Operation Midway Blitz. And in addition, the litigation forced the compilation of an extensive video and documentary record of the abuses of the federal agents. That is evidence that we and others are using now to demand criminal accountability for those agents who violated the criminal laws of our state. There is no telling what might have unfolded last fall and what might still be unfolding if hundreds and thousands of good people had not raised their voices in protest, if whistles had not been blown, if multiple legal challenges had not been pursued against the deployment of the National Guard, against the wrongful detentions, against the violence on the streets. We in Chicago, like the folks in Minneapolis and elsewhere around the country, showed up for one another. Let me also say this. If the events of since January 2025 have taught us anything, it is that we cannot predict what will happen next. We are, as David said, truly in an existential moment. To state the obvious, we need to be ready. We need to be willing. We need to have our ears to the ground and listen for the call. Whether that call is to protect the integrity of the vote in the coming election, whether it is to continue demanding fairness and transparency in the immigration system, whether it is to continue insisting on humane conditions of detention at Broadview and other detention facilities around the country, whatever it is, we need to listen for the call. Our individual efforts may seem small and insufficient, but they are no less necessary. It is like voting. Your vote standing alone isn't worth a thing, but your vote in combination with the votes of hundreds and thousands of other people can sway an election and change the world. Your standing on a street corner may be a small protest indeed, but standing on that corner with friends and neighbors and folks you don't even know, gradually and necessarily that protest becomes big and large and significant. I am very grateful to the Council of Lawyers for encouraging and facilitating us as we individually and collectively do what must be done to protect the rule of law and this great country. Thanks again for the award.
Thank you very much. Our next awardee is retired federal judge Ruben Castillo. Judge Castillo has been a long-time supporter of civil liberties ever since his days at the Mexican-American Legal Defense Organization. Judge Castillo most recently chaired the Illinois Accountability Commission appointed by the governor, and along with the members of that commission, they documented and sought to publicly hold ICE agents accountable for their conduct in Chicago and its surrounding suburbs over the past year. Judge Castillo, it's our pleasure to hear from you.
Thank you. Thanks. Last time I was with David and Robert Held, we were standing outside the Maywood courthouse demanding justice. And I understand from having spent my whole life here in Chicago, this is a collective effort and the effort has to continue. For my own part, I was happy being a retired federal judge, occasional mediation or arbitration, when all of a sudden I got a call from Deputy Governor Grace Q on behalf of the governor asking me to head the commission. And it was easy to say yes, because I certainly had views about rule of law and immigration. And despite my promise to my good wife of almost 50 years to spend time with her and her granddaughters, had to break that promise because this was a cause that they believed in as much as I did. And let me just say, I wish it hadn't been that way. I never envisioned a world where I would spend my retirement from the federal bench seeking accountability for the misconduct of federal agents. I never envisioned a world like that, and yet we all saw what happened not only here, but in Minneapolis and in other cities. And let me just say, this is still happening here and in other cities, especially right now. Miami, Florida, other parts of the country are being hit, and it's still being done, and maybe not as open and notoriously, as I said in a TV interview yesterday, but it's still being done, and I think the new Secretary of Homeland Security is still seeking to please a certain resident on Pennsylvania Avenue, actually two, because Mr. Miller has a lot of blood on his hands, and I hope to see him held accountable for that. Well, why it was easy is because there are people like Berto and the Council of Lawyers, people like Cara Hendrickson, who we're going to hear from, who have done the work. Certainly her litigation on behalf of the state of Illinois made us all proud, as there was resistance to the idea that the National Guard and the military should come in here. And that resistance was very successful, and we were able to use that at the commission. The records that were made before the district court were very helpful to the work of the commission, and our fine director, Hina Mahmood, who directed a lot of our great hearings, but they really built on a record that had already been made at the district court level. So I have to acknowledge that. And the people on the front lines, all I can tell you is people like Berto, who was out there on the streets, which I was not, really deserve credit. And we saw that over and over again. A lot of attorneys who testified before us went out on the streets and put their own physical safety at risk to document the misconduct that occurred. And we need to keep doing that. And I really give credit to the governor for seeing a need to document this and to seek accountability. And we will pursue this to the ends of the earth, because I just cannot live with the world where federal agents can come in here and just do as they please with impunity. I just would not want to hand that world over to my granddaughters. And so I thank you for the acknowledgement of the work we did. It really is shared by the entire commission, and I'm very grateful to the council. I was an active council member for many years, proud to serve as vice president way back when. I won't give away the year, but this means a lot to me, so thank you.
Thank you, Judge. Our next awardee is someone who has been a personal exemplar for me. It's Tsao. Fred and the Illinois Coalition for Immigrants and Refugees' Rights has provided a multitude of efforts to make sure that immigrants were informed of their rights, and that ICER oversaw and continues to oversee, coordinate, and provide aid to immigrants, refugees, and their families. Fred and ICER have also pushed for and continue to push for other policy changes to make our city, county, and state a more welcoming place. So thank you, Fred.
Excuse me. Thank you, David. I have to confess that when David first shared with me that I would be getting this award, my immediate response was, I'm not worthy, especially given the illustrious company here. So somewhat in similar spirit to Berto, I'm not going to accept this award on behalf of myself. I'm going to accept it on behalf of so many people who've been involved over the past year and a half or so. My colleagues at ICR, our board, our action council, our member organizations, our program partners who serve immigrants and refugees on a daily basis, our hotline operators who've been handling overwhelming numbers of calls, our rapid response teams who are able to drop everything on a moment's notice and go out and investigate a report of ICE activity. Everyone who shared Know Your Rights information, who gave presentations, who picked up Know Your Rights cards and door hangers and yard signs and flyers and gave them out, shared them with our communities. Everyone who's providing mutual aid, everyone who's providing accompaniment, anybody else who's providing support in this time of crisis for people who are feeling vulnerable or who've been directly affected. Anyone who took out their phones to document what they're seeing, and then use those phones to call these reports in. Anybody who picked up a whistle or blew those whistles to give the alert to their neighbors. The journalists who reported and further investigated what we've been seeing. The clergy who've lent their prophetic voice to protesting what's happening. And of course, all the lawyers who have been on the front lines. I myself am a recovering attorney, so I don't really practice, but I have to hand it to all the lawyers who've been involved in the litigation and just in the immediate defense, and even just the counseling for immigrants who may be really concerned at what's going to happen to them, what's going to happen next, what should I even comply with this latest edict from Homeland Security. And then, everybody who took the time to go down to Springfield to advocate for legislation, whether it's the Safe Schools Act last spring of last year, or the SALT Act from last fall, or various other pieces of legislation that we've been trying to push to make sure that our institutions at least are ready for immigration enforcement, and so that we have adequate funding, more than adequate funding, for the legal services and the other support services that our community organizations are able to provide. And then finally, this is for all the people who've been taken by ICE and CBP. Some of whom have been fortunate to be able to gain release, thanks again to really great lawyering. Many of whom are still in immigration detention and enduring really horrible conditions. Quite a number of whom have already been deported or have given up their right to a hearing and are now separated from their families. And all too many of whom are no longer with us physically, whether due to ICE neglect or or ice recklessness, for Silverio, for Marimar, for Renee, for Alex, for the 50 people so far that we know of who died in ICE custody, and all those people who died shortly after being released from ICE custody, whom ICE no longer counts. This award is for you. I will close. Last time I spoke at an event that Dave was part of, it was for Reform for Illinois. I had just seen Patti Smith, and so I quoted Patti Smith twice, and so I'll close with one of the quotes that I used that time. The people have the power to redeem the work of fools. Thank you.
Thank you, Fred. Finally, last but far from least, we want to honor Mary Meg McCarthy and the attorneys at the National Immigrant Justice Center. Mary couldn't be here today. She expressed her regrets, but Katrina Ramos, who's a senior attorney at the National Immigrant Justice Center, is here to accept the award on behalf of Mary Meg. Yeah.
Hello, everyone. I am very sorry that I'm not Mary Meg, but I am very honored to be here just the same. Mary Meg does send her regrets, and she told me that I would be having a lot more fun than she was where she's at. So I do want to thank you all for being here and for putting up with me. On behalf of Mary Meg and the National Immigrant Justice Center, I am honored to accept this award. At NIJC, we are focused on providing immigration, legal information, and representation through policy, advocacy, federal litigation, and direct legal services to those who might not be able to afford an attorney. We are the witnesses to the experiences of our clients, which then informs our policy and our litigation work. We are so lucky and grateful to have such a strong support from the Chicago legal community, including our network of over 2,600 pro bono attorneys who make our work possible. I do want to acknowledge Mary Meg and really just draw attention to all of her amazing advocacy work that she has put into building and nurturing NIJC and our pro bono program so that we are a powerhouse in this area today. And it does so much to help protect our friends and neighbors. I think as many of you know, Mary Meg is retiring at the end of the month after leading NIJC as our executive director for nearly 30 years. And while it is a very well-deserved retirement, we are also very sad to see her go. Everyone up here has said amazing things, and I do want to echo so much of what was said, and that is that I feel so blessed to work as an attorney in a city like Chicago and in the state of Illinois. As we've seen over the past year, particularly last fall, we live in a community that goes above and beyond to support and protect each other. We are a legal community that calls and emails and asks, how can I help? How can I get involved? What can I do? We are a community of neighbors that comes out with whistles and calls the ICER hotline when our neighbors need protection. Chicago is a city of neighborhoods, and we all protect our neighbors. I am so grateful to all of you for your ongoing support for this award, and honestly, the tireless work of the entire Chicago legal community does to protect basic constitutional rights and access to due process for all people is inspiring. So thank you for everything that you all do to continue to protect each other and for your commitments to advancing justice.
Thank you, Katrina. And thanks again to all of our awardees. Let's give them an appreciative wave. Thank you all. So I'm now going to introduce our next set of speakers. Cara Hendrickson, a 2001 graduate of Harvard Law School, who wrote and waited on the Seventh Circuit at the Court of Appeals. Cara spent over 10 years litigating complex cases for several large law firms in Chicago before joining the Illinois Attorney General's office as head of the Public Interest Division. Following a short hiatus from that job, which she spent largely as an executive director of Impact for Equity, Cara rejoined the Illinois Attorney General's office in 2025 to head up its resistance to illegal actions by the Trump administration. Cara will be interviewed by Sharon Fairley, who is a former federal prosecutor. Sharon subsequently headed up agencies that investigate and oversee complaints of police misconduct by members of the Chicago Police Department. Her work included extensively reforming that agency, now known as the Civilian Oversight and Protection Agency, or COPA. For the past 8 years, Sharon has been teaching criminal law and procedure at the University of Chicago Law School, where she is a member of the faculty, and she also continues her focus and work on police oversight. Sharon and Cara, the floor is yours.
Thank you, David. So, because I do have the microphone, I can't help but do a little bit of fangirling here today. Because among the awardees are several of my most favorite people. I met Berto before he became a lawyer, and I remember when he said, "I'm going to law school," I was like, this is gonna be good, and it has been, right? And my very, very first bench trial was before Judge Castillo. Learned a ton from him. And then when I worked in the Police Accountability Clinic at the law school, Locke was one of my supervising attorneys. So congratulations to everyone, all the awardees, and thank you for all that you've been doing. Okay, but so now then I get to turn fangirl about this woman here, who is an amazing attorney. And I first met Cara back when we were working on the consent decree, and when the Attorney General's office made the important decision to come in after federal oversight was walked away from by the first Trump administration. And then, of course, having a chance to observe all the fantastic work and her leadership at Impact for Equity. So it's an honor to be able to have this conversation with you today, Cara, and thank you for all that you do, too.
If it's my turn, it's such a pleasure, and I won't repeat all the words that Sharon just said about the really incredible group of people who we are following, but it is a tough act to follow, and I just want to echo really my gratitude for the leadership that we saw up here on the stage. It can be hard to find these days, and it's really a pleasure to be in a room full of leaders who are standing up in this moment, and so thanks for the opportunity to be here with you all this afternoon. It's really an honor.
Great. All right, so we're supposed to talk a little bit about enforcement of the rule of law, and your office's involvement in that. And so when you look to what the Illinois Attorney General's office expresses as their mission, it's really broad. I mean, we're talking about advocating for the people of Illinois, getting involved in legislation related to the state, litigation, of course, to protect the citizens of the state and the state interests. And then also the office provides a number of services to people. So how does the enforcement of the rule of law fit into that broader mission, and in terms of how you structure your work and how you prioritize the work that the office really does?
Thanks for that question. So as this room knows well, the Attorney General is the state's chief legal officer. So that is a pretty broad responsibility. It has been for some time, and I would say no taller order than today, in the times that we're living in now. And so the office generally, as folks in this room know, has responsibilities to defend the state, defend state officers in litigation, to manage appeals that happen across our legal system, to protect the rights of consumers, to protect the environment. There is a long list of responsibilities that the office holds. We have offices in Chicago, we have offices across the state. It really is quite a large operation with a significant amount of responsibility. Thousands and thousands of cases are managed by our office every year. In addition, The office and the Attorney General has a broad responsibility as the state's chief legal officer to protect the rule of law. This is a responsibility that Attorney General Raul and some other state attorneys general have been talking more and more about in the past year and a half, but it's not the first time that the office has really thought broadly about its responsibilities to protect the state, to protect the residents of our state, to protect the laws of our state, to protect the values of our state, including against threats by the federal government. Sharon mentioned that during the first time that we were under a Trump administration, one example of a way that the Attorney General's office stepped up was to step into the role of the US Department of Justice when it completed its investigation of the Chicago Police Department and then left town. And so we all were holding a report that confirmed what many people had known for a long time about problems with our Chicago Police Department, but we had no enforcement mechanism. So the office stepped up and brought suit against the city of Chicago and negotiated a long-standing consent decree still in place. We're still enforcing that consent decree today in an effort to improve the police department in the city of Chicago. This time has been different by a matter of degree. The kind of challenges that we have seen to the state and to the residents of our state have really been amplified to a big degree, significantly. And so it's forced the office, to your question, Sharon, to think much more concretely about what is the role of a state attorney general, what is the role of leadership at the state level right now, and how can we use the very limited resources that the office has to best use to protect the rule of law, to protect the constitutional values, our federal laws as they are applied to our state and the people of our state. And so I think we'll talk a little bit more about that.
Sure, absolutely. So in the case of the consent decree, there was a vacuum, right, of the federal government walked away. But now we're facing instances where they're encroaching on states' rights and the rights of our state citizens. And so when the president issues an executive order or one of the federal agencies enacts a policy that is viewed as impinging on the state's rights or the rights of our citizens, what can you do? Like, how do you think about it? What are the options that you think about or consider? How do you approach those kinds of challenges?
It's a challenge, and it is a challenge, honestly, that our office is navigating multiple times every single day. It really would be hard to overstate. I think encroachment is a very generous noun. The amount of direct limitations would be another generous word to say on the state's activities by the federal government every day. Some of it is visible and makes the news. We can talk a little bit about the National Guard case, for example, that's very visible, but the powers of the federal government across federal agencies, across the power of the executive, have really been focused on policies, practices, and legal mechanisms that are inconsistent with, in many cases, the United States Constitution, federal laws, and in some cases, the state of Illinois laws. So we spend a lot of time trying to understand exactly what is happening at the federal level, what is happening with respect to the state of Illinois, and then evaluating how to approach it. We have, as you mentioned before, brought a number of affirmative lawsuits. I think as of this morning, maybe we're at something like 67 affirmative lawsuits that the office has filed in the past year and a half. For those of you who do complex plaintiff side constitutional litigation, you know that each one of these cases is extraordinarily difficult to put together, to identify the legal theories that apply, to develop the evidence. These are often cases that are moving on a very quick timeline. They are often emergency cases. We are going in on temporary restraining orders. We're going on preliminary injunctions. We are sometimes turning these cases around in periods of time, under 3 days. So I need to now, and I will several times during this presentation, pause to say, like many other people who've been on the stage before me, I am here really representing a group of people who are doing this work. We are asking the attorneys in the Attorney General's office, who all have day jobs, No one has had cases taken off their plate, to stay up often overnight, to work weekends repeatedly over the course of many, many, many months, to draft this litigation, to file it, to argue it, and then to pursue it as the case continues. So we are filing litigation, and we're doing it quickly, and we're doing it with a fair amount of success. We are sometimes identifying legal problems that the state does not have standing to pursue. So because much of this litigation is adverse to the federal government, we do not have parents patriae authority in the same way we would against a different defendant. And so there are some times where there are people in this room who are representing clients who have better standing or are better situated to bring these cases than we are. We're very mindful of that. We're goal-oriented. If there's a better plaintiff, go get them. And what we are doing in those cases is often, when we can, filing amicus briefs to support the work of those cases. So we filed, I don't know how many at this point, over 100 amicus briefs in support of those private cases. And then oftentimes too, what we are seeing happening is a little bit of a slower moving disaster in terms of regulatory change. So we are identifying and filing comments to propose regulatory changes that in some instances will also mature into litigation.
So it sounds to me, from what you said, that obviously there's a challenge in terms of the complexity of the issues that you're facing, but there's also just the sheer volume of it. So what is different now in terms of the volume of the level of work that needs to take place given this current administration? Is it different?
Yes.
Okay.
So all of the work, I mean, if you think about it in terms of work streams, the cases that I've named, the amicus briefs that I've identified, the comments that are being filed, not to mention the legislative work and the communications work, is all new. Did not, for the most part, did not exist 24 months ago. And so you really are adding on to your first question, the responsibilities of an office that already has very broad responsibility and limited resources. All of that work on top of existing cases that the office is handling. So just again, to the extent you see somebody from the Illinois Attorney General's office in your life, give them a hearty handshake because it really is the work of lawyers who are motivated and passionate, like the people in this room, that are making these cases happen and that are doing this work every day.
One of the things that I've noticed is that, obviously you aren't doing this alone, right? There are AGs across the country who are engaged along with you. And so obviously there's a lot of collaboration that's going on. How do those collaborations come about? How do you work together? How do you strategize together about how to make this work as successful as it can be?
You're so right. That is one of an additional, I would say, difference between the way this work is happening now as compared to the way we saw it happen in the first administration. There was collaboration then too, but I would say it was more relationship-based and sort of case by case. Here there is a very, very structured and organized collaboration between state attorneys general who, like attorney general roles, see their responsibility as defending the rule of law in their states. And so we do a number, but not all, of these cases with other states. We are often joining in what we call a multi-state, sort of multi-plaintiff case that is challenging when there are efforts that are affecting all of us across the country. We are all joining as plaintiffs, and we are filing in jurisdictions where we have any state that is a plaintiff in the case. Some of our cases we do not file as an entire coalition, either because they're just impacting us in the state of Illinois. So National Guard would be one example. We've also filed a case against the Department of Homeland Security related to Operation Midway Blitz. There are others. Or some cases are a smaller group of states because states are being targeted specifically by the administration. So some of that targeting is focused just on blue states. Some of that targeting is focused on a subset of states within a group of blue states. And Illinois is very popular as a state that's been targeted by the administration. So we have a number of cases that are a group of 3 of us or a group of 5 of us that have filed in those cases. So there is really a need to create kind of a force multiplier effect. The volume is significant, the issues are very complex, and so we really do try to work in partnership when at all possible with other states to bring these cases and then to continue to litigate them for the full course of the case.
So now you mentioned that, obviously there are, dozens of lawsuits that are, that have been undertaken and many successful. So I'd love to hear a little bit more about some of the successes. And of course, Judge Castillo mentioned one of them earlier today. Sure. So what do you consider to be some of the most successful stories that have been achieved thus far?
I really appreciate that question. And David said we had 2 hours to answer this one. Is that right? Everybody's going to be here a while. I mean, I do really think that it's an important story to tell because there's lots to be discouraged about right now. And I do think that the success that we've had in many of these cases is something to be really hopeful about. We have, of the cases that have been heard at a district court level, we've had some level of success in about 90% of the cases that we have filed. And so I think it's really important to acknowledge that the system, to a large degree, is working. That we have lawyers who are stepping up. We have judges that are fairly examining the lawsuits that have been filed and ruling on them. And that is tremendously important. So one way that we measure a question about sort of success, although maybe not the most important way, but one way is by dollars protected. So a number of the challenges to the state of Illinois have been to our funding from the federal government. Like every state, we get a lot of money from the federal government. And the various federal agencies have used tools in their power to either cancel that funding outright as sort of punishment, or to put conditions on that funding. So for example, we've had a number of federal agencies require that for the state of Illinois to receive funding from, for example, the U.S. Department of Transportation for highway dollars, or from FEMA for emergency disaster relief, that we agree to cooperate in immigration enforcement in a way that would violate our state law, our Trust Act that many people here have been involved in protecting. And so we have litigated those cases. And overall, if you look at our whole portfolio, just from a dollars protected for the state of Illinois in the past 18 months, we've protected about $14 billion in money that the state is owed from the federal government. So if you just think about that from like an order of magnitude perspective, it both, I think, is a great success story in terms of how the litigation so far has been able to protect those dollars and either get them flowing again or keep them flowing, but also a sense of the order of magnitude of the challenge that we're facing every single day. So if you see a director of a state agency in Illinois, give them a hearty handshake as well, because really it is the whole of government that is in the state that is facing these challenges on a day-to-day basis. People who are administering our most important state systems sometimes do not know from a day-to-day basis whether the check is in the mail. So they're really significant challenges. Other successes really not measured in dollars for us include the National Guard case. We've talked about that already. We are very proud in the office that the case that Illinois brought challenging the federalization and the deployment of not only our Illinois National Guard, but also the deployment of the Texas National Guard to the state of Illinois was successful, not only in the district court, but actually all the way up to the United States Supreme Court on December 23rd. And that was a really challenging case. And I think it's safe to say that really the outcome of that case, particularly in the United States Supreme Court, we've seen shift the strategy of the federal government, not only in Illinois, but in other states as well, away from, at least for the time being, deployment of the National Guard in a way that we feel very strongly threatens the state's sovereignty and was a very dangerous road to go down. So there have been a number of ways in which we've been able to both stop harmful policies from being enacted in the state and stop the intrusion of federal officials here, and also protect Illinois dollars. Some of the cases I just need to name, we in this space get really accustomed to these really fast motions being heard in the form of a TRO or a PI, and we've had a number of cases that have gone up that way. And there are cases that we're just plain old litigating, that we are taking through to summary judgment, that we're doing discovery. Those we think are also terrifically important, both because we hope are generating discovery that is really important from a transparency perspective, and also because we are very interested in durable legal victories. We do see this as a 4-year effort. So we try to be really thoughtful about the way we're constructing cases to ensure that we are getting outcomes that will be durable for the entire length of the period. So our case against the Department of Homeland Security related to Operation Midway Blitz is right now waiting ruling on a motion to dismiss. And then we will move as quickly as we can to discovery, and we hope really get some permanent injunctive relief to prevent some tactics that we saw here in Operation Midway Blitz. So it spans the spectrum, but there's a lot to be proud of to be a resident of the state of Illinois right now.
Are there any cases that are currently underway that you can talk about that you think are really important and should, this group should be really paying attention to?
Every single case that we file. It's honestly, it's very true. We do list on our website the cases that are filed by the office. It's not a Cadillac website, it's a Honda Civic, so you need to look through there a little bit to find them. But we do think one thing that's very important in this moment is transparency about what the office is doing, why we are making the decisions that we are making about which cases to file and which cases not to file. And so you can go through and find every press release and every complaint on the website. If you look carefully enough, they're there, I promise. It's hard to put them in just one category. I do think that the cases that we have filed in particular that relate to separation of powers concerns are quite significant. Some of those cases relate to funding. Obviously, Congress has the power of the purse, and protection of that power is very important. But others relate to sort of integrity and fidelity to the law itself, and those span really a wide range of subject areas. So they have to do with everything from the content of our sex ed curriculum in the state of Illinois to the conduct of federal agencies when they are auditing our agencies and allowing our safety net programs to be administered every single day for the benefit of the people of the state of Illinois. And so it's hard to know, which particular case to watch. I don't have a favorite, right. But I will say that they are overall quite significant.
Well, let's just close by letting me ask you, what can citizens, lawyers, activists, public interest groups, what can we do to support and amplify the work of the office?
I would say that question is both like what can you do and what are you already doing? I mean, we've heard already about today the efforts of many people using many tools. I particularly appreciated, Fred, a lot of your remarks, but your listing of the non-lawyer roles and the incredible strength that they have brought to the movement. I think that's really important, particularly in a room of lawyers. But almost all of you standing up here have been a part of some of our work in some way or another. So, the case that Loevy brought in front of Judge Ellis and the evidentiary record that Locke described is an evidentiary record that we are now using in our case against the Department of Homeland Security as we move forward with third-party discovery and try to get permanent injunctive relief. The community organizing and protection of our residents on a day-to-day basis are, we're hoping you're witnesses in our case, as well as, sources of information that we need to be able to bring these cases and to take positions with respect to the federal government. There are a number of cases that we cannot bring. Standing is a real limitation for us as we are bringing cases adverse to the federal government. And so we are periodically talking with many of you about your representation of individuals, of NGOs, of private industry, of various groups that are yourselves bringing litigation that we follow very closely and that we are considering when we're considering how to use our resources, really do see this as sort of a global movement effort. And so there are some instances where we think this issue is covered by very competent lawyers who are representing directly effective plaintiffs. And so this is not a case for us. We will file an amicus brief or do whatever we think we can to be helpful. So that kind of communication and collaboration is really critical. We see this as an integrated effort across all the people in this room and many people who are not in this room. So I would say keep on doing what you're doing. And if you are looking for opportunities to get involved, in addition to the people that you've seen standing up here today who are doing this really important work, we are always looking for pro bono partnerships in our office. We're looking for amicus briefs to be filed in support of the cases that we are bringing. We are looking for legal research. We are looking for creative ideas. You know, we are finding ourselves litigating cases that I think many of us would have thought 2 years ago impossible. Impossible that these would be the legal challenges to our democracy, to our country, to our legal system. We are researching legal issues that have never been researched before. And so we really do need the intellectual capital of everybody in this room. I think David said it at the top, to be thinking of creative legal ideas and the vision forward and in the future. So as we are, I think, sort of standing there with a fire hose and trying to react in real time to the problems as they are presented to us in sometimes very immediate and dire circumstances, there is a reservoir of legal thinking, of legal research, of folks who are sort of standing there alongside us and helping us generate those strategies going forward. That's incredibly valuable to us. Some of you have already been our thought partners in some of these cases. And so there are lots of ways, really, particularly for this really talented room, to continue to contribute to the effort. And so we couldn't do it without that partnership.
Great. Thank you so much. Thanks for all that you do.
So we'll be hearing from Liam Connell, who is a member of a group called the Patriotic Millionaires. Liam began life as a poor Irish child who worked in a variety of blue-collar jobs from a young age until he finally managed to emerge with a degree from graduate school. He then took a job with an IBM research center, and when he turned 28 years old, he moved to the United States, got married, had 2 kids, and went to work on Wall Street. He later founded and ran several algorithmic trading firms before selling them to Goldman Sachs and Sequoia Capital. Liam has always been committed to the fight for human rights, both in Britain and here. And he is currently involved in strategic activism to counter the long-term campaign by some of the wealthy in this nation who seek to hoard their wealth and power to the detriment of the common good. He pursues such work with the Patriotic Millionaires and with various other groups. Liam, the floor is yours.
I'll just hold on to this. I'm flattered and honored to be invited to speak to the Chicago Council of Lawyers. I didn't know much about the organization, but I was incredibly impressed with what I heard in the last just over an hour. And now I kind of realize why I was invited. I think our values are aligned. I'm kind of an accidental millionaire. My nickname in college was Trotsky. After working in Dublin, and even though I made good salary, I blew it all in nightclubs, etc. So when I came to the States at the age of 28, I was not only completely broke, but I actually had a $2,000 credit bill that I hadn't paid yet. But in coming to the States, I had 3 goals. One was, to continue a pretty adventurous life. I mean, I was a 13-year-old barman in a cabaret lounge. I was a carpenter in Germany. I was a very unimpressive bouncer and an incredibly unsuccessful runway model. So the second thing was I was sick of being poor. Like a lot of people who grew up in poverty, I had a paranoia about being poor again. And the third thing, being an immigrant, and by the way, thank you for all the people who've been working on immigrant rights. As an immigrant, And for the immigrants here, you don't want to go back unsuccessful. So I had 3 job offers, and I took the one on Wall Street because it offered an extra $1,000 a year. So that's how I made my career decision. And I actually had a really interesting career on Wall Street and in the Chicago trading community. But about 15 years ago, I realized I'd really overshot my economic goals. I had way more money than I had anticipated making. And I wanted to use that economic freedom to do things that I wanted to do other than make money. So that's what I've been trying to use my time and treasure for the last 15 years to do things I find interesting. One of the things I find interesting is being engaged in the world and being engaged as a member of our society. So enough about me. What's Patriotic Billionaires? It's a group of American millionaires who are advocating economic and political justice. We have 3 priorities: tax the rich, tax us more than we're being taxed right now. The second one is pay the people. Let's pay people a living wage. And the third one is spread the power. There's too much concentrated power, particularly economic power, in this country, and we know it because we're experiencing that power even if we don't want it. And I'll give you examples. So it was founded in 2010, about 200 members across 30 states, and we also have UK and Canadian chapters. Some notable members: Abigail Disney, who's a Disney heiress, George Zimmer, who I'd never heard of before, but apparently he's an heir to Men's Warehouse. Chuck Collins, who's the grandson of Oscar Mayer. Morris Pearl chairs, he's an ex-BlackRock MD, but I'm actually the coolest member. So let's talk about the three pillars of what we're working on. So taxes, I know how unfair and how self-serving the tax system is. As a professional trader, I don't know if you know this, Congressman Russ McCarthy managed to carve out a tax deal for professional traders. 60-40 tax treatment, 60% long-term capital gains, 40% short-term. So I was making tens of millions of dollars a year at one stage. I was paying lower federal tax rate than some of the secretaries in my company. I'm stealing the line from Warren Buffett, but it's true. That actually was true. All the money that I made and now invest, most of my income is long-term capital gains. So I'm still paying federal income tax of, maybe mid-20s. If we taxed all income as ordinary income, if we taxed all income as we tax labor, and I've done, I'm a geek, I've done the homework on this. We could actually give a tax break. Everybody below 75 grand wouldn't have to pay any federal tax. You could basically phase it in to 150,000. You would, if you did that, if you taxed all long-term capital gains, all the carried interest, all this stuff, if you taxed inherited wealth, not only could we do that, but we would actually generate between $5 and $10 trillion in the next 10 years. We would actually help our deficit. So we could, it's not complicated, folks. We could simplify the tax system, make it fairer. Why should we tax labor more than we tax unearned income? I mean, it is, well, we know why it is, because the people with the economic power are determining our tax system along with everything else. So wages, so many of the wages that people are getting for doing an honest days and weeks work, and sometimes working 2 or 3 jobs isn't enough to support the family. So the minimum wage has been frozen at $7.25 for 16 years. And the CEO pay is now like 281 times the typical worker income. And it was only 21 times more in 1965. So simply the CEO versus the average worker, that inequality has increased tenfold within my lifetime. I'm pretty old, so that explains that. I spend most of my time focusing on the pernicious effect of money in politics. You talk to any elected representative, they're spending most of the time calling people like me. I get calls all the time. I could tell them that the sky is pink, and they will agree with me as long as I write them a check. I can come up with the most cocky, and believe me, I've been in donor meetings with other rich people, and I've heard some of the most stupid ideas in my life. And these are the people. Somebody called me and said, I can arrange for you to talk to some prominent politicians. And I said, can I pay you to get them to stop calling me? I have I have access to senior senators because I'm rich. But I do donate to political campaigns and to candidates, but I'm trying to spend most of my time and money in my way trying to reform our political system within my capabilities. We know, because we've just gone through a primary cycle in Chicago, the impact of super PACs. Actually, the most influential in primaries, because between 90 and 95% of congressional seats are safe seats. So it's really the primaries that are determining who's representing you. Now, if there's 2 people in the primary, the good person versus the person backed by special interests, the good person might win. But we've seen in the Chicago primaries, if you have 15, 20 people, 99 times out of 100, the person with the money will win. And that explains why issues that 70 to 80% of the American people support will never get passed, because they are not the constituency. The constituency are rich people like me. The Patriotic Millionaires, we're not doing this out of charity or to feel good. This is all in our self-interest, because we're all members of our society. So inequality creates many, many pernicious effects. One, it's really bad for the economy. Concentrated wealth is bad. You need, from a very utilitarian viewpoint, you need an equitable society for a healthy economy. But in terms of our democracy is in real trouble. And it's in real trouble because there's been a concerted effort really from the late 1970s by business and inherited wealth to pervert our democracy to represent them rather than us. I mean, it wasn't perfect before the 70s, but there's been a very focused campaign to pervert democracy since then. Our environment, our foreign policy, all of these areas are negatively affected by special interests that are not looking out for us, but are looking out for them. So, the Patriotic Millionaires, we have, there's 2 things that we kind of focus on. We have a legislative agenda. So there's an Equal Tax Act, which basically does what I suggested earlier on, tax all income in a consistent way. We have Working Americans Tax Cut Act, which is similar. We have a Cost of Living Wage Act. which is basically meant to increase minimum wage. And we have an Anti-Oligarch Act, which is intended to reduce the influence of concentrated wealth. By the way, Delia Ramirez is a great ally of ours in that regard. By the way, one thing I didn't mention is the pernicious effect that I looked. 2 days ago, there was a great New York Times op-ed. Elon Musk confirms ancient concerns about the super rich. It's a great article that came out 2 days ago. And the other thing concentrated wealth does is it's pernicious morally. I've seen and mixed with a lot of rich people. I've been very concerned about protecting myself and my family from the pernicious effects of wealth. Wealth can be a little bit like the ring in Lord of the Rings. It becomes something, an obsession in itself. So Elon Musk is the poster child of moral corruption of wealth. The best quote from him to represent this is, he says, empathy is the major weakness in our current civilization. But I mean, look at the guy. I mean, it's almost like Golem with the ring. The second thing that we do is we try to tell stories. Morris Pearl has a great video saying like, hey, why would rich people want to live in New York City? It's a great city. Actually, it's the same with Chicago. I'm a big fan of both cities. This idea that you're going to move to an awful place called Florida to save some money, when you've got tons of money. What's money? Money is supposed to be enjoying yourself, not to, pile it up on top of each other. So we try to tell stories and sometimes do kind of slightly silly things, like act like rich people and go to Washington and ask them to tax us heavily. And the last thing, patriotic. I'm always a little bit, sensitive when I hear the word patriotic, because I hear so much bullshit about, how I love America, and like Trump almost humping the American flag. I mean, it's just, well, I see it, we all have a duty to each other. We have a responsibility to people in America and people outside of America. That's what I think the best definition of patriotic is. And I'll leave it at that. I know I'm the last speaker, so you probably want to get out of here. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Liam. That was all great. For those interested in the other issues you talked about money and politics and so on, I recommend you seek out our Executive Director of Reform for Illinois in the back of the room, Elisa Kaplan, who heads up Reform for Illinois, where we work for campaign finance reform, ranked choice voting, and ethics in state government. The only thing Liam said that I disagree with is that he's the last speaker. We have one more, and then we will be done. But thank you, Liam. That was a great speech. As a final event of our program today, it is my distinct pleasure to introduce Rob Held, who was recently sworn in as the Council of Lawyers' new president. Rob is a former Air Force pilot, fighter pilot. Since leaving the Air Force, Rob has been engaged in the practice of law in Chicago for the past several decades, heading up his own firm. And upset by actions of this federal administration began taking with respect to the treatment of immigrants, since last summer, Rob has been increasingly active in observing and protesting ICE's maltreatment of immigrants in Chicago, at Broadview, in Minneapolis, and elsewhere. He's been attacked by ICE agents. He has advocated for and visited detained individuals in El Paso, Texas, and Kokomo and Indianapolis, Indiana. And as I mentioned, he's been attacked by ICE agents on several occasions. One of those attacks resulted in criminal charges against the ICE agent in question. And he's also successfully sued Broadview under the First Amendment for imposing overly limiting restrictions on the Broadview protests. He's currently the victim of a vindictive and baseless criminal charge by the Broadview Police Department. And so we are pleased and honored to have him this year as our president of the council. Rob, the floor is yours. You may close us out.
Thank you, David. Thanks to our honored guests, the generous supporters, my fellow board members, the volunteers, and members of the council. The council's mission includes defending civil liberties and protecting the rule of law. And it's the rule of law that I want to spend a couple of minutes on. Emphasis on the couple of minutes. I know what time it is. We're going to get out in just a few minutes. The rule of law is under serious threat today, as many of the speakers have made clear, and is clear from the headlines every day. I want to talk about what's really happening, which is a not anecdotal attack on the rule of law, but a systemic attack. And to make that point, I want to talk primarily about two cases. And that is, the first one is Trump versus the Internal Revenue Service. Now, unlike many of the speakers, I'm not a scholar, but I always understood that for a case to proceed, you have to have adverse parties. That didn't happen when Donald Trump sued the Internal Revenue Service. In fact, the IRS, which should be represented by the DOJ, did not file an appearance or an answer or a motion to dismiss or even appear in court. And when they wanted an extension, when the defendant, United States, wanted an extension, that extension was filed by the plaintiffs. You can't make this stuff up. There really were not adverse parties, and putting aside the merits of Mr. Trump's lawsuit for the release of his tax returns, and putting aside the statute of limitations, the fact that the IRS was not a proper defendant because they did not release his tax returns, really the fundamental problem was what is now pending, and that is the allegation that our government, in the person of Todd Blanche, colluded with his former client, Donald Trump. There was collusion. There was a fraud upon the court. And that's what's pending, and we'll see in the coming days and weeks how that plays out. Note to Liam, because of the tax points that you made, the settlement agreement that was signed by our government says that the $1.776 billion anti-weaponization fund is not taxable. That's right. That's what the settlement says. Okay. The blurred line between Trump's former attorney and the acting attorney general is something that I think troubles every person that reads about that collusion, that case, that fraud upon the court. It points to the need for internal checks, but with respect to us as professionals, we need checks, internal checks within our profession itself, and that we have rules of professional conduct, we have the ARDC, and I'll get to that in a second. And I do want to spend just a moment talking about the Broadview 6 case. I was out in Broadview on September 26th when the defendants committed the acts that were alleged to have been criminal. The ICE agent drove his car into the crowd. He drove his car into protesters. Now, obviously, they were in the public street, but they didn't move in front of his car to block it. He drove his vehicle into. But putting all that aside, I want to get to the ethical issues and the rule of law. We're all familiar with, I think by now, what happened with the grand jury, because we have the transcripts themselves. And the Department of Justice engaged in the conduct that included vouching, it included ex parte conversations with grand jurors, and it included dismissing grand jurors who were not buying what the prosecutors were selling. They were not going along with the indictment. But what's worse, and what happened in that case, is that when the judge asked for the transcripts, they were redacted in a way that was materially misleading. And that's all going to come to a head, and we may see Mr. Boutros take a witness stand at some point as that case develops. We all have a moral compass and a professional obligation. We have individual responsibilities. Of course, we're going to refuse to participate in a sham or deceptive practices like the acting Attorney General did. But we also must speak up and speak out when we see patent misconduct, especially when that misconduct is done by those with governmental power. The Chicago Council of Lawyers is an independent voice for professional ethics and the integrity of our courts. I call on everybody to renew your membership if it has lapsed. Encourage your colleagues, especially your younger colleagues, to join the council if you're not already a member. I invite everybody to contribute their expertise, your scholarship, writing, testimony, and advocacy, and of course, I ask for your financial support. The rule of law depends on what lawyers do when our profession is under pressure, and that is the case right now. So many of you are doing so much. If you can do more, that's great. And if you can join this effort, I welcome you. Thank you so much for your support and commitment.